It's Second Chance September all month long on Tell Us About Yourself. I'm Christian Carrion, and we're embarking on game show deep dives as some of Tell Us About Yourself listeners' favorite guests return for round 2. Tune into the fun all month long as we celebrate these returning champions. Second Chance September this month on Tell Us About Yourself. Tell Us About Yourself, Conversations with Game Show Contestants is produced in partnership with the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, one of the largest history museums in the United States, and one of the leading museums serving families with highly interactive exhibits and programs. Since 1968, the Strong Museum has been dedicated to exploring the ways in which play encourages learning, creativity, and discovery, and how it illuminates cultural history. And their National Archives of Game Show History. Founded by industry veterans Bob Bowden and Howard Blumenthal, the archive is home to thousands of artifacts representing over 80 years of broadcasting, including props, set designs, video interviews with game show professionals, and other iconic elements from the history of television at play. For more information about the National Archives of Game Show History or the Strong National Museum of Play, visit museumofplay.org or call area code 585-263-2700.
Blue 35.
This is John's 20th win, and it's an all-time record for solo players. So, John, you have $115,000 now. You're going for $5,000 and a total of $120,000. He has 60 seconds in which to do it. Okay, now, John, I will begin. It's you and me against the house, and I wish you well. I'll begin when you do.
Thank you, Bill. TMM.
A Julie Andrews movie.
Thoroughly Modern Millie.
Correct.
MOV.
A play by William Shakespeare.
Merchant of Venice.
Right.
JPS.
Known as the March King.
John Philip Sousa.
Right.
BW.
A beetle that feeds on cotton.
Boll Weevil.
Right.
EM.
Formerly teamed with Mike Nichols.
Elaine May.
That's it, John. Congratulations. Well done. Really super game player, John. Now stand up here with me and look at all Congratulations, John.
I'm John Hatton. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Well, I started out as a kid being interested in game shows and found out that I enjoyed storing away silly facts, and it was fun to do. So back then, of course, you didn't have the internet, all that good stuff. You had things like books and encyclopedias. So I was good at that. So coming from Minneapolis to get to my game shows was a path that went through the University of Minnesota. Then I got lucky and got to the West Coast in the university. And after I finished there, I got down to San Bernardino in 1967. And here I am. And we found out that San Bernardino is a friendly place, good town to live in, a good town to raise my kids in. So we've had a good full life here.
If you could explain to me, John, what role specifically game shows played in your life growing up before you got the opportunity to be on Blockbusters. So many of the people who listen to this show love that kind of television, and I think they all have their own unique stories regarding what game shows meant to them. What did game shows mean to you?
Good, cool. I remember being a kid. Okay, I was 10 years old and listening to the radio. And there were a couple of shows that had question and answer stuff. What anybody in your audience might remember Dr. IQ, right? Or
yes,
the $64 question. Well, the $64 question actually may have been the first game show that added a phrase to the common lingo of the country. And people would say, well, that's the $64 question, isn't it? Okay. Now, they got Bob Hawke, I think, was the guy who was the host. And I remember there used to be a part of that which was called the Lemax question. Well, think about it. Lemax is camel spelled backwards, and Camel Cigarettes, of course, sponsored the show. So I remember one of the questions even. It was, what state capital does not have any of the letters L-E-M-A-C? Well, think about it. Dumpty-dumpty-dumpty-dumpty-dump. And the answer is Boston. Okay? Well, I remember that from all those years ago. So I obviously was an easy person to latch onto this pursuit. Time went on, and of course, game shows started on TV. There was the $64 question, Hell March, $64,000 challenge, a few other copycats, and people would talk about it. Steve, did you see the show last night? Hey, that was a lot of money. Then, of course, came Charles Van Doren, and the whole thing got flushed down the drain. Okay? But nonetheless, I continued to collect trivia. Didn't call it trivia back then. I don't even know what it was called. Meaningless random facts. Later in my adult life, I became increasingly amused that people would pay me real money to have me pull these things out of whatever database they were stored inside my head. So when we got to down here to, well, it's hard being on a game show if you're from Minnesota. Let's face it. So by the time I got to San Bernardino, though, suddenly I'm in game show heaven. And I happened to have a position at the State University that on occasion I could get a day off and go in and try out for game shows. Well, those days to try out for game shows, unlike now where you do it online, you fill it out, push a button, and it goes in and it's evaluated. Well, you had to call them up on a thing called the telephone and make an appointment, and you go in and you try out for the show. When they look at you and decide whether they wanted you or not. Well, my wife and I did that a few times, and we hit the jackpot with split second. It was a Tom Kennedy show. They've done a revision now it's on the Game Show Network. Format's a little different. Anyway, I was on split second and won a car. Well, for a couple of kids, with 3 kids starting a family, winning a car was a big deal. Like $2,500, and we got the quintessential station wagon. Right? Well, the very next year, Joan, my delightful wife of 60-some plus years, went on concentration. Jack Nar's show. Darned if she didn't win a car, too. So here we are, a couple of kids with 2 free cars and no car payments. So that's a pretty good
wonderful.
deal.
Wonderful.
So the second time with Joan and calling the car, I went back. It was Crest Chevrolet, the place in town here. The guy just laughed his tail off. Signing up 2 kids for free cars.
What a great time to be interested in game shows, because in the mid-'70s, there are so many. A lot of the people who love this type of TV as much as I do, we look back on the mid-'70s as the golden era of that type of TV. I mean, there were just so many shows on at the same time. I think, in one year, there were as many as 30 that kind of came and went as the year progressed. And for somebody who is interested in storing trivia and recalling, seemingly random facts, what a boon. It seems like those skills were just so in demand at that time, especially on a show like Split Second, which was very difficult. That's a very fondly remembered show among game show fans.
Yeah, and of course Tom Kennedy was a primo host, as was Jack Nars.
They were the best. They were the best, and they were brothers, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we have to take a little detour to talk about Joan on the concentration show.
Sure.
I'm talking to game show fanatics, right?
Oh, yes.
Right? So one of the things that a lot of players don't pay attention to is the game. They stuff their brain through with information, but you have to play the game. Okay? So you look at the game concentration, and you're matching pairs. Okay, you got the board. You got that in your face, right? Got it in your head. Right? How's a good way to remember which number you called? Well, you take the board, it's got 30 squares, and divide it by 3, and you may only call numbers divided by 3. Right? She was the only one we ever saw who did that. She ran the board twice, right? And got the prize at the end, the 2 rebuses in 10 seconds. Bingo, won a car. Right? Same with Jeopardy. You watch these guys who spend forever trying to learn stuff about history, literature, hip-hop, whatever, and then blow it by making stupid wagers in the game. Okay, well, that's my rant. Okay.
No, but I agree with you 100%. Jeopardy comes down to the wagering ability because you can know everything in the world, and if you don't know how to bet or you're not great with that button, that would be your downfall. The smartest, I think there are so many smart people that get on that show, and because they can't master the physical element of the game, they don't do well.
Yeah, anyways, it's kind of always surprised me that, that's, because I play poker, so I'm used to playing poker. So
Sure. John,
anyway,
if I could rewind for just a minute, and let's talk for a minute, because you mentioned the $64,000 question and how those shows transition from radio to television. And the $64,000 question, I believe, was the most popular show on television at the time.
absolutely.
What do you remember about the period of time in which those shows were found out to be less than legitimate? As somebody who loved trivia and loved the original radio show, and I'm sure loved the television versions, was that a disappointment to you?
Oh, it's major. That you take this professor from, where was it, Harvard or someplace. It was a cheat. And somehow tried to squeeze out it's entertainment. Don't expect that. That's baloney. That was a real disservice, I thought, on so many levels. But gee, who would have thought we'd have a president someday that might not tell the truth? It's shocking. Okay. What are you going to do? Yeah, it was, and it just really hampered the industry when it came back in its split second, and then later at Blockbusters. You are, as a contestant, you are sequestered, and you are in the green room with the other contestants, and you go no place without somebody with you. Right? I remember one night I was waiting to get on the whether I would become a contestant, and went to the restroom and wound up standing next to Tommy Newsom. So that was the big celebrity that I met in the men's room while I was waiting.
Oh, how incredible! The drummer, right, from the Tonight Show band.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
While we're standing there, of course. But yeah, and they made very clear. In fact, on split second, I was scheduled to appear, and they found out that I was running for the local school board, and they said, no, you can't be on TV while you're running for an elective office, and delayed my appearance for several months. So they were really watching out for what they were doing.
I bet they were, because it was such a volatile time to be in entertainment. Those late 50s really took everybody by surprise when the scandals broke. And I think that so many people looked up to people like Charles Van Doren as these intellectual heroes. For that to be shattered for so many people, game shows, I think, had no choice but to be extra careful. And I think it's to their benefit. Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I suppose you could figure out some way to cheat, but what's the point of cheating in something like this? If you're doing it for fun, it turns out to be worth a lot of money. So enjoy it. We watch them all. The game shows that we watch, we kind of stay in the house for a while because we're older. But if you go to a physical therapy, for example, in the morning, what's on TV? Let's Make a Deal and Price is Right. Okay?
Oh, yes.
And you talk about good hosts. I think you got Wayne Brady and Drew Carey are just primo. Drew Carey following Bob Barker. Boy, how's that for an assignment?
Oh, yes. Yes, and I think that, and not to harp on this for too long, but The Price is Right is a show that's very important to me. That was my first appearance. I was one of Bob Barker's final contestants, and that was a life-changing experience. Yeah. But Drew Carey, like you said, following that act and taking that job and having to learn all of those games, because a lot of people didn't remember that when Bob Barker started the show, there weren't 80 different games that could be played. There were maybe 5 or 6. And he learned them as they introduced them over a period of 35 years. Drew Carey, I think, did a wonderful job, and he really made the show his own. Against all odds, a lot of people thought that he wouldn't be a good fit, but it turned out that the show is just as strong no matter who's hosting it.
Yeah, and Drew Carey changed. He modified, listened to people, and now fits it perfectly. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, of course, on Blockbusters, I had Bill Cullen, who I think is probably one of the all-time best.
Oh, it doesn't get any better. He's my absolute favorite.
Yeah, and he's the first guy who was on The Price is Right. He started that show. The top prize in that show? They gave away a house. You could be on that show and somehow win a house in Florida. God almighty, okay.
Unbelievable time to be a game show fan. I always feel honored to talk to somebody who's worked with people or appeared on shows with people like Tom Kennedy and Jack Nars, and Bill Cullen is at the top of that list. One of our researchers here at the National Archives of Game Show History, his name is Adam Needif. He wrote the official biography on Bill Cullen, and through talking to him, I've learned so much about his career and just how good he was, not only on camera, but off camera. Yeah, what do you remember about Bill Cullen as a person?
Oh, it was like being in the living room playing a game with your uncle that you're a little embarrassed about.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But obviously, I can't talk to him off show. When I'm at the breaks, he might say something clever or something. But the only time we talked off camera was the last show, because I was on the last show, the last day. He was in his office and I think I've canceled more shows than anybody else in the business. That's what's his comment. But there were times during he actually blew one question on my game, a very important one. He was reading the question, and it was the game-deciding hexagon, and the question was, who was our fattest president, Taft? What he said.
Oh, no.
As soon as he said it, he stopped, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh, shit. Okay. And then, of course, you throw out the question. Fortunately, I got the next one and then won the game. that could have been a disaster.
Right. And just for the benefit of anyone listening who maybe isn't immediately familiar with Blockbusters, because it is a very fondly remembered show among the circle of game show fans that there is in the world, but relatively obscure, I think, to casual viewers. It was a board game essentially, and there's a solo player against a team of 2, and the idea is that they're going to compete to see if 2 heads are better than 1. That was always the catchphrase, and it was a board of hexagons, and you all competed to connect one side of the board to the other, and it was through trivia questions, and you buzz in and get a question right, and you turn it your color. Very intense game. Your performance, and it's funny, when I initially talked to you about doing the podcast, you seemed a bit surprised that your performance on the show was so fondly remembered.
Oh God!
I don't. Yeah, well, I don't know if this is something that you think about very often, but you played 10 games of Blockbusters. You won both games in each match because it was a best 2 out of 3, and then you won the $5,000 in the gold run each time for a total of $60,000. Then the show increased their limit. Now you could stay up until you win 20 games. It used to be 10, and then they retire you. Now it's 20. You came back and you did it again. And it's funny that I think if this show were to be on the air today and a contestant were to pull off a feat like that, in the context of what game shows are today, I think about Jeopardy and how you can stay until you're defeated and you have people who win, millions of dollars. I think that you would have been the talk of the town for so long these days. It's a really incredible feat. And I wonder if you ever give any thought to just how much focus and how much skill and knowledge winning 20 games in a row like that requires.
Yeah, I do. I look back on it and think, God, that was pretty good. I think particularly the second half, when the game had been on for a year or more, and the competition was just incredibly tougher because people had had a chance to see the show, practice at it, and get good. So that I was able to do it a second time was, that was really an accomplishment. And it was fun. Coming back to, let me move to the fire date. Okay, let me start. It needs a little bit of setup. The week before, I had been waiting to become a contestant for several weeks. Okay? And finally got called in on the week before Thanksgiving on a Friday. Okay. And went up against a mother-son team that had won 3 or 4 times and were pretty good. And I played against them and I won the first game. And I think I won the second game too. And I won the game. And it was going into the next game and their board broke. Okay. It malfunctioned and they couldn't fix it. Now that's important because it affects everything that follows. Because they moved to and I can remember, the last question I got was, what O is the capital of? And I banged in and said Norway, and that's how I won the first game. So it was rescheduled for the next Monday. Well, on that day, my wife and I decided that I would go in early and she would follow me later, having picked up the kids. That was the Monday. So I was left at like 10 o'clock in the morning to get in there by noon or thereabouts to be sequestered in the green room. When the story broke later, the paper said, man wins $60,000 while his house burns to the ground. That was the headline, and that was the story. The real story is what happened in San Bernardino. At about 11 o'clock or thereabouts, Joan notices smoke, heavy smoke coming in. She collects a couple of things, puts them in her car, and goes to find the kids, who are in 3 different schools. She collects Colin, my youngest, and Jennifer, my daughter, from their schools. Smoke is pouring into the neighborhood. The houses are beginning to burn. In our neighborhood, 12 homes or thereabouts burn. Ours, the next door neighbor, the ones across the street, down around the corner, and across the wash, 250 plus homes burn to the ground. The wind is blowing at 50 miles to 80 miles an hour, creating its own firestorm. I don't know if you've ever tried to stand in a wind of 50. It is almost impossible at 80 to get blown off your feet. The embers came in. The homes, most of them were built with wooden shake shingles. From start to finish, once the house started burning, it was gone in 8 to 10 minutes. Jones saw enough of that. He got the 2 dogs, safety, elected the kids, went down to a real estate office, made some calls, some arrangements, whatever, put the kids in the car, drove to Burbank's TV studio. Now that's the story, what she and the kids did here. I'm sitting there waiting to play the game, and then I just go ahead and play the game because they don't tell me anything. They decided they weren't going to say anything to me about it because they didn't want to interfere with my playing the game. They also made up a malarkey story that the governmental agencies were so concerned about cheating in games that they wanted the contestants not to look at the audience anymore. Well, they did that because they were afraid that if I looked at the audience, I would see the disheveled state of my family. Or maybe she would see me and start to cry. Who knows? So they sat in the audience and watched me, and the games went on. And I won the game, and I won the bonus. And I won the game, and I won the bonus. And I won the game, and I won the bonus. And then they took a break. So this is still going on. Her still there, knowing that they and the kids are returning to nothing. Okay? And so we have 2 more games after the dinner break, and I win the game, and I win the bonus, and I win the game, and I win the bonus. And I'm at this point, as I get out of my chair and turn around, I have $36,000. That's a huge amount of money. The most money I'd ever had in my pocket. And the contestant coordinator comes up to me and says, "John, your family's back in the green room." And I'm starting to cry right now. And I say, "Why?" And she says, "Because your house burned down." And I say, "No, you mean my cabin up in the mountains?" And she said, "No, let's go talk to your family." And I go back in there, and my kids later said, "They put us in this tiny little room to wait for you to come in and see us." And I go in, and of course, then Joan tells me what happened. So the Blockbusters staff is there, and they offered to put us up in a hotel in Los Angeles if that would help. They make it clear that the decision to continue or not, totally mine. That if I wanted to delay, come back at another time, they just say something on air, and that's what they would do. I said, "Okay, we'll go home and think about it. I'll let you know tomorrow morning." Because instead of having a break between tapings, as they usually do, because of the glitch that occurred on Friday, they needed to continue taping the very day. Okay. So we got in our 2 cars and drove back to San Bernardino. Stayed with some friends. And the next morning came up to look at the house, which of course didn't exist. That was 3 feet tall piles of rubble. Yeah, you could see the chimney and a couple of Corningware things in the dishwasher survived. And one Roman urn lamp, oil lamp that we had bought in Rome as a souvenir. They're probably 2,000 years old. We still have that. Anyway, so we thought, okay, Joan looked at me and we kind of said, "Well, what do you want to do?" said, give me a couple minutes. I went out in the front and walked down the street a little ways. And I looked down and there was a penny. I thought, that's a sign. What the hell, at least I could say it was a sign. Picked it up and said, let's go. So I still had some clothes because they bring in outfits to wear. What makes it look like you're different day when you're on a show. So I had something to wear and to bring in. Joan and the kids had what they had after the fire, I guess. So anyway, we all went in together, and I had 4 shows to go. And won the first one in the bonus, and won the second one in the bonus, and the third one in the...
And I've been doing this sort of work for longer than I care to remember, perhaps even longer than you care to remember. But John Hatton, I think I said Horton, I mean Hatton, but anyway, John Hatton is truly a remarkable man. And I mean that, John, and I will come to you in just a second and give you a chance to explain to them what I'm talking about. He's done very well. He is a psychologist. He's happily married. He has a family. And this show, as is just about everything else on television these days, is done on tape. So what we are talking about is in the past, recent past, but past nonetheless. John, do you want to tell what awaited you after yesterday's show and after yesterday's taping session when you walked out of here on air with $36,000?
Well, it was an incredible high to have won that amount of money. I discovered after the show that my wife and family were in the audience, having known all day that my house had been burned to the ground in the San Bernardino fire.
While John was here with us. John, you're really remarkable. I commend you. I wish you well. It says something about your profession.
Well, Bill, if I might add, on the way back driving with the kids, I told them that life goes on, that we were tough enough not to let this kind of thing foul things up. I was involved in what I think is a super experience on this show, and I look on it as kind of an object lesson to my kids that you go on with what you're doing no matter what happens.
Marvelous lesson. Really good. So, it's been a tragic past few days here in the Los Angeles area. Fires that precede floods, but we all hang on and do what John tells us to do. Go on in spite of everything. Well, now then, let's pick up the game right where we left it off. The score, you take a look at our...
If you remember, what effect, if any, did that situation have on your game from that point on? I mean, clearly, like you said, you won the game and you won the bonus and again. How much more difficult was playing that game after going through what you had gone through?
Not at all. I don't think so. I think I was able to shut it down and focus. And if I had not, they gave me the opportunity to pull the plug at any time. And they said that a couple of times they looked at me and thought maybe that I was thinking about quitting, but I didn't. Yes, Tone reminds me of one of the questions I had. It was you, who was the last of the Mohicans? I thought, out of nowhere, I said, Uncas. God, and I said to myself, where did that come from? One of the best one of the games I remember most is like the third one of the first round. It was in the middle of the 60 seconds, and I had 3 to go. And it got down, and I looked at the clock, and there was 23 seconds left. And I had, and the question was, who was the host of Queen for a Day? Jesus, I can't even remember what it was now, but I got it. And then it was down to like 12 seconds, and Bill Cullen was reading as fast as he could. He says, who was the star? It was A.G. Who was the star of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy? Alec Guinness. P.I. where the bounty mutineers settled. Pitcairn Island, bam, won it. That was the best game I played.
Oh, unbelievable. Unbelievable to have the wherewithal to play that game in front of all those people, under the lights, in front of the cameras. Having gone through all that is just is inspiring. I'm thinking about your run. I'll tell you, John, that I think in the course of the show having been rerun on Game Show Network, I think I've seen every single one of your games multiple times. I've seen them all. And there was one in particular, I don't know if you have any memory of this, but it was a gold run. I believe it was the final hexagon, or close to the final. It was somewhere near the end. And the initials were J.A.
Oh, yes, that one. Yeah.
He painted pictures of birds.
John Audubon.
No.
James E.P.
First permanent Spanish settlement in Texas.
El Paso.
El Paso's right, you got that. Gee, I'm sorry. That's a shame, John. J.A., there's the one.
It's John James Audubon, isn't it?
Well, he painted pictures of birds. If it is John James Audubon, that would change the thing. I have James Audubon here. All right, we'll be back here in just a minute. Right now, we're going to pause. Let you watch this, please. Sometimes when mistakes are made, they can turn out to be pluses. And, John, I think this was going to be a plus for you. You mentioned, I drew pictures of birds, J.A., and you said John Audubon, as I recall, and I had the answer, James. And that blew your chance, because you'd already gone over 3 spots there. You only had 2 more to go. And you had a lot of time on the clock. That blew your chance really of making it, because it forced you around and got you out of rhythm and everything. You then said it was John James, and we said perhaps, and if we'll look it up. Well, Bobby Sherman, our producer, has looked it up in his little coloring book, which he takes with him everywhere I go. The name is indeed John James Audubon. We assume you could have made it, so 5,000 is only fair, John. I bet you. And I know, I do know, I don't mean to deprecate the financial end of it, but I've learned to know a little bit about John, who's been with us for some time, and I know that he was more affected by his playing of the game than he was by the money
I
involved.
really was.
So I know you were, John.
I was looking at that thing.
You're a good game player, and you deserve that because you actually got it, as far as we're concerned. So your streak is still unbroken in our official record.
Good.
You will go down without an asterisk alongside your name, John.
No Roger Maris.
I know what.
And I'm pleased to see, and over the years I have seen it on several occasions, that when the answer to a question is Audubon, it is now invariably John James Audubon as the answer. Whereas in the past it would have been James. So I affected the whole English language about John James Audubon.
Unbelievable. Wow.
And I remember the last one I won in that first round. It was the second game. It was the very last game that if I won, I'd get to 60. And I was at that point I was getting tired. And the final game was against a very good sister team. And the game started white, 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 white. They had 4 whites, and I didn't have a hexagon on the board. And they asked the next question, and I got it. And another one, and I got it. And typically I did not try to avoid the killer box, but on this one I did. And it got down to she gets it or I get it, and that's the game. And it was S. And Bill begins the question. He says, what horse was? She rang in and said, Seattle Slew. And I heard, Seattle Slew, oh shit. Because she knew she had it wrong, because the answers are always only one word.
Right.
So it kicked to me, and I had to give away Secretariat, and that won the game. That was what I remember too.
Wow, on the ropes. That's incredible. Yeah. That's incredible. You know, in the course of doing this show, I've talked to a lot of contestants from this era, from the late 70s, early 80s game shows. I talked to a man named Lieutenant Tom McKee, and for a while, he was the world record holder for winnings on a game show. He was on a show called Tic Tac Dough. He won 88 games in a row. Yeah, he won 88 games, came away with about $300,000 in cars and cash and trips. And when we talked about that final game, when his opponent, defeated him after, again, 88 games, he described a sense of relief once it was over, because he talked about the pressure just kind of building up that, no matter how good you are at a game, the act of playing it on TV is naturally pressure-inducing. It's a stressful experience, and the more you win, you can kind of feel those winnings pile up. What do you remember about your last game? And I know that you were not defeated, you retired, but having seen that experience to the end, what were your feelings coming out of that?
I was very pleased with myself, frankly, to be lucky enough to be able to do it again. It was bittersweet because I was the last one on the show. The staff was upset at being canceled, and you could tell. I can't say I felt sorry for the people who were sitting in there hoping I'd lose so they could get on, but I did feel kind of sad about the whole thing. It was clearly an end to a chapter in my life, and certainly, in the people who were there as well. I had my parents there, and that was pretty cool to have my mom and dad on stage with me.
They must have been so proud.
Well, yeah, they did a pretty good job with me.
Yeah, sure. In the immediate, maybe not so immediate, but in the time after your appearance on Blockbusters, what did that experience do for your desire to get on another game show? Was that something that you were seeking out, or was it a little more difficult, seeing as how you had been on a show for so long already?
Well, I'm going to take it here on that question. I've thought a lot about it. It's sound kind of weird, but I'm going to say that's unethical. There are only so many opportunities to have a life-changing experience, like the one with the game shows. I had my slots. I had the split-second slot, and I won a car, and that changed my life. I had the Blockbusters slots, and that changed my life. It would not be right for me to take a slot away from somebody else who could have that same opportunity.
It wasn't a feeling. How do you do, sir? My name is Cullen, and where are you relative with John?
I'm his dad.
You are John. Turn around and give everyone a look at you. John's father, ladies and gentlemen. John, you want to introduce everybody? You deserve it, John. Take the mic there.
This is my mother, Mabel.
Hello, Mabel.
And my maiden aunt and second mother, Aunt Ethel.
Hello, Aunt Ethel. How are you? And thank you. And the gang I know from previous appearances. This is a fine family, John. What are you going to do? Going to take them all out and buy them a Sunday or something?
Take them out and get them I can't say that.
No.
Take them out and get them a hamburger.
A hamburger. Won't that be fun? And a little ginger ale on the side with mine, John. Thank you all. Mr. Hatton, congratulations. You got a fine family here. Thank you. For the Hattons, everybody. We'll be back here in just a moment. Right now, I got a word.
One of the reasons I can't be on these game shows now is I haven't learned anything since 1987, 1992, pick a year. So I know nothing about the social culture stuff and Marvel and Thor and music. And so if they ask me a question, what's your favorite, tune, I'm going to say something from Glenn Miller's era. Okay.
Sure.
So yeah, I am. For a variety of reasons, I'm out of the business. Okay. Some In terms of people I remember from Blockbusters, there's certainly, of course, the McCarthys, who were the pair who also got the maximum. The other one that I remember was Jean Visage, who was a woman who watched me the first go around and said, "Gee, if that guy can do it, I can do it." And she got in a plane in New Jersey and flew out and applied and got on the show the second time around. And so when I came in, this woman runs up to me, throws her arms around me, and says, "It's so nice to see you again." And then realized she'd never seen me and I had never seen her. And we became kind of at least pals in terms of sending Christmas cards. And the thing that was kind of cute about her was she played in the women's professional baseball team in the Second World War. So she was just a fun gal. So I remembered her. And she was in the waiting room on the last day of the show and was the winner of the game. They didn't do the bonus, but she won the game, and she won $5,000. So she was the last winner on the show.
Wonderful. John, if you don't mind me asking, how long has it been since you told your Blockbusters story?
Oh, I never have. I mean, tell it to who? I mean, I tell it to,
anyone. It's such a fascinating story, and I had mentioned it while we were talking in the lead up to you talking to me here, and I mentioned that I think that you would be surprised, if you're not already aware, of just how many people are fascinated and inspired and just completely taken by your story, by your appearances on Blockbusters. It's unbelievable. I told my closer friends who are into this that I had the chance to talk to you today, and they are over the moon. They can't wait to hear what you have to say. And so I thought at some point, in the 45 years that it's been since Blockbusters, that somebody would have come to you and wanted to talk about it and wanted to hear your story. I am surprised and honored that this is the first time you're telling it.
Oh yeah, that's it. Yeah. I was just kidding with my wife earlier today. There is only one time that anybody on the street recognized me, and that was we were driving in the car with the kids to Scottsdale, stopped at a gas station in Blythe, which is a border town, or to get gas, and the people at the other pump with a Texas license plate, the guy looks and says, "Are you that guy who was on the show where your house burned down?" That was the only time.
Wow.
Of course, the kids were embarrassed.
Sure.
They've been embarrassed by me for bigger things than that.
Right. Unbelievable. It's such an honor to be able to talk to you. When I think about my journey as it relates to game shows, as it relates to even what we're doing now, it really started with Game Show Network. We got Game Show Network in the house when I was 6 years old. This was 1995.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I had always loved game shows up to that point, and this channel coming was a godsend. It's all we watched in the house, and one of the shows that was repeated all the time was Blockbusters. So that was my introduction to Bill Cullen, who his influence guided so much in my life as it relates to broadcasting, as it relates to to TV, to game shows, and introduced me to Blockbusters. And it was one of the first shows that I truly fell in love with. I was fascinated by the show because I loved board games. And I imagine that back then the show must have been popular with kids as well who loved board games, tabletop games, anything of that nature, because that's what it was at the end of the day, was a board game. But to be able to talk to you and to learn your experience and to hear it from you, from John Hatton, is unbelievable. And I hope that doesn't put you in any sort of uncomfortable position. I just it's a real honor to be able to learn all of this from you.
One of the things about my profession, I'm a clinical psychologist, okay, is people say nice things to you about what you've done and helped them somehow. And it's always been a little hard for me to deal with that, to tell you the truth. So to hear it from you, I really, really appreciate it. I thank you very much for that.
Tell Us About Yourself. Conversations with Game Show Contestants is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Christian Carrion, from my studio in beautiful downtown Lancaster City, Pennsylvania. Co-executive producer Cory Anotado. Researcher Chuck Donegan. This has been a production of BuzzerBlog, the most popular game show website in the world, in partnership with the National Archives of Game Show History at the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. For more information, visit museumofplay.org. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Christian Carrion. Good night. Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99 and turn every night into Game Show Night. By Game Show Forensics. Join host Robert McKee and his crack team of forensic game show scientists as they take you on the deepest dives imaginable in a quest to analyze the most detailed minutia of game shows nobody else dares to, or cares to, investigate. Nothing is too whimsical for examination, no semantics too absurd for the research extremists at GameShowForensics.com. Parental discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury. It's Second Chance September all month long on Tell Us About Yourself. I'm Christian Carrion, and we're embarking on game show deep dives as some of Tell Us About Yourself listeners' favorite guests return for round 2. Tune into the fun all month long as we celebrate these returning champions. Second Chance September this month on Tell Us About Yourself.